chair of the local Robert Lenz Group Sierra Club. On behalf of our executive committee, I welcome all of the candidates for the mayor of Charleston to tonight's debate. And I also wish to welcome our partner, Groundswell. Thank you all for being here. And of course, thank you, the audience, for taking your time to engage with the candidates on the important issue of flooding due to sea level rise, tides, and rain. The mission of the Sierra Club is to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. We believe that people who get out into the marshes, creeks, rivers, forests, and fields gain an appreciation for those cherished places, and then they seek to protect them. Charleston, with its many landscapes and historic structures, is one of those cherished places. You're here tonight because you have seen the risk growing and the threat. It's threatening everything from our daily commute to our homes. You know the stats. Sea level rise caused by climate change requires a bold response. The Dutch dialogues address engineered and natural options to slow, store, and drain water. These efforts must be joined by additional steps that address the root causes of climate change, such as more and better mass transit, clean, renewable energy, and energy conservation measures, to name a few. Some conservation projects would even yield savings that could be spent on flood mitigation. Tonight, we will seek answers from our candidates on how they would protect Charleston and work together with council and other local and regional leaders. Our joint goal is to explore, enjoy, and protect Charleston. Thank you all. The bathrooms are next door. So, right, we go out to this door, and it's right in the building next door, okay? And then I want to make sure that everyone silences their cell phones. So, just a reminder there. So, next we will hear from Susan Lyons from Groundswell. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks to the Robert Lenz Group of Sierra Club for co-sponsoring this important debate with Groundswell. Groundswell is a strictly apolitical advocacy group of Charleston residents whose properties have been damaged by flooding. Whoop, can you hear me now? Better? Groundswell is a strictly apolitical advocacy group of Charleston residents whose properties have been damaged by flooding or threatened by flooding. We organized just after Hurricane Irma because we were alarmed by a lack of response by our local government. We're doing better, but we have a very long way to go. This debate focuses exclusively on flooding. Our moderator is Eileen Waldron of WOHM 96.3 FM, listener-supported community radio. Eileen is an award-winning veteran journalist whose regular afternoon program, The Lowdown, focuses on critical low-country issues. Thanks to all the candidates for participating. Thank you for being here, and please remember to vote on November 5th. Eileen.
Thank you, Susan. First, I'd like to welcome the candidates. Mayor John Tecklenburg, Nonprofit Director Renee Orth, City Councilperson Gary White, former City Councilperson Maurice Washington, community activist Sherry Irwin, and City Councilperson Mike Stevens. Welcome, and thank you for being here. I'd also like to say thank you to our timekeepers today, Peter Goodrich and Midge Peary. There they are. They're going to keep us all on the straight and narrow, for sure. And I'd like to go over some of the rules for the debate. First of all, please stay seated. Can you do it? We know you can. We know you can. And candidates will have 2 minutes for each question, and then there will be a 1-minute rebuttal for anyone who chooses to do that. But we'll let you finish your thought. We won't cut you off mid-word, but I will interrupt you if you're not answering the question or you're going on too long. I can be tough. All right, so we're going to start with a starter question, and this is really a show of hands. This has no rebuttal, it's just a show of hands. Please raise your hand if you have read the Dutch Dialogues report. I have. I see all hands are up. Okay. Congratulations. Our first question tonight is for Mr. Seekings, and then the rest of you will have a chance for rebuttal. Mr. Seekings, which two recommendations from the Dutch Dialogues report would be your priority if you were elected mayor?
So, thank you. First, my name is Mike Seekings. Thank you all for being here. Before I begin, I do want to recognize my lovely wife, Michelle, who's here and been with us the whole way, so thank you. And welcome everybody to District 8 and City Council. I actually have the report right here, and I actually highlighted the two things that I think we need to do immediately. The first thing they've recommended, and the first thing they observed when they came to see us, and when we spent some time with them, by the way, in the Netherlands, was that we in the city of Charleston, and we actually need to be the leaders regionally, we need to develop a citywide water plan. That's number one, and I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to talk about it tonight. We've not done it. We've not done it in the last 4 years, the last 8 years. We do not, and the Dutch recognized, we do not have a citywide water plan. Think about all the things that we've done in the last 4 years and what we've talked about in this community with water and the challenges with water, and the Dutch, the leaders in the world, have come to us and said you don't have the most basic thing that you need, a citywide water plan. The next thing, the second thing that's in there that we need to adopt citywide is to conduct a Charleston groundwater assessment. Groundwater is the driver of how water moves around us every single day. The level of the groundwater dictates whether you're going to flood in a rainstorm, in a surge event. We today, every one of us as we sit here, unless you've done this in your own backyard with your own gauge, your own tidal gauge, your own meter, we do not know today at any place in the city, any of the 5 corners of the city, where our groundwater is. And without knowing that, we cannot develop a strategy, especially for smaller scale results. We've got to know that. So there are many recommendations in there, but number one, develop a citywide plan. That's basic. The Dutch have to come tell us that. Why haven't we done it? And then let's know where our groundwater is and go from there. There's so much more. There's so much more, and they are wise, but those are the two, to answer your question, that we need to do. So thank you all for being here. We'll build off of that. Thank you.
Yes, who would like to comment or rebut?
Well, thank you, and I must say I was so pleased to convince Ambassador Scherer when I went to Washington, D.C. to bring the Dutch Dialogues process to Charleston. It's been so important and meaningful to us, and the combination of what they presented to us last Thursday night in this document, DutchDialoguesCharleston.org, you can all pull it up, along with our city's own strategies for sea level rise and flooding, create a vision going forward. And so the important thing that the Dutch bring us is a different way of looking at things, a different mindset. And one of the most important things is to use natural systems wherever possible. They believe in engineering too, but wherever possible, like in Church Street Drainage Basin would be a great example, to use natural systems. And they also apply that to everyday citizens being engaged and using natural systems like rain gardens so that we all can rain-proof Charleston. And I see Carol Lee Williams back there. She's agreed to take her neighborhood as a pilot neighborhood where every citizen will be contacted and asked to be part of rain-proofing that. Second would be to elevate, build higher.
So did you agree with Mr. Seekings? Are you rebutting what he said, or are you moving on?
I'm saying between these two documents, we have a plan, folks. We know what we need to do going forward. Now's the time to execute plans that have already been devised for us over the last 2 years, but add to it the mindset of what the Dutch have offered.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. White.
And I don't necessarily disagree with Councilman Seekings in his assertion, but I do think that as I see it, there's an immediate opportunity that we can actually begin to do something that's going to have 100% immediate impact, and that's updating our stormwater manual so that it encourages people, and actually doesn't encourage them, it requires them to adhere to the building in areas where it's appropriate, not building in areas where it's not appropriate, and making sure that we're not building and putting people in harm's way. So I do think that that's probably step one. The good news story, we're already in that process now, and we likely will be able to pass that sometime, if not by the end of this year, early next year.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to my lovely wife, Violet, thank you for being here with me this evening. I do partially agree with Councilman Seekins with respect to the overall master plan. I think personally that it should be a storm drain plan, not just for the city of Charleston, but a regional storm drain plan. Yeah, we could put $2 billion in the ground. If the county doesn't put its $6.1 billion also towards stormwater mitigation, it's all for naught at the end of the day. Water does not discriminate. It flows wherever it wants to go. So we have to reach well beyond city boundaries and encourage county council, Berkeley County, Dorchester County to join this fight. Secondly, we simply have to stop what? Fighting nature. It doesn't work. It wins every single time. No more wetland fillings. No more overdevelopment or development in FEMA floodplains. Over 100,000 buildings in Charleston County City is located in a FEMA floodplain. And the lights agree with me on that.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Who would like to be next? I guess it's the mood light. Ms. Orth, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Renee Orth. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I agree with Mr. Seekings that we need a plan. What I think that plan needs to include is a shift away from talking about drainage. We're in the low country. There's really not any place for the water to drain. We need to be focusing on increasing the absorption capacity of our land. And the Dutch have given us some clues about how to do that: rain gardens, cisterns, rain barrels. Louisiana has recently passed an ordinance requiring new developments to be able to retain at least I think it's the first 1.25 inches of water that falls on their land. So understanding that the government and big gray infrastructure projects are not going to be sufficient to solve this problem for us. We're going to have to take personal collective responsibility for retaining the water that lands on our property and figuring out how to, if anything, hopefully turn it into a resource rather than a liability. Thank you.
Ms. Irwin?
I pretty much agree with what Maurice and most of them said. We have to stop fill and build. That is the biggest problem right there. People that never flooded 4 or 5 years ago are flooding. In fact, there's one here tonight. I'm gonna cry looking at you. She's paying a mortgage but can't live in her house anymore because the city built around her with fill and build. And this has to stop. It's so simple. So much of it is so simple. You know, we shouldn't have been filling in our marshlands, and I look at these massive apartments at the foot of our bridges, and you know that, aside from the fact that it's the beauty that's being destroyed, these marshlands are like a sponge. It keeps the water from going further inland, and now the water has no place to go but around the building and further inland. So there's a lot of ordinances that have been passed over the years that actually have encouraged this, and we do need to look at those ordinances and start overturning them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Washington, the next question is for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Flooding and development are often at cross purposes in Charleston. What is your plan for land use, including zoning, to ensure we don't make more mistakes?
Well, first of all, we have to start putting or allowing zoning and planning to drive development, as opposed to development driving zoning and planning. Zoning is the city of Charleston, the county of Charleston, the state government, most important asset. It does three important things. It first defines what is at risk. This is zoning. What's at risk? The second thing it defines what is safe to build. And the third, which is the most important, where it is safe to build. If we tighten the zoning laws and regulations of Charleston City, Charleston County, it can't just be Charleston City. Again, it has to be a regional approach to this incredibly serious hassle. So my administration would work with the members of City Council to ensure that our zoning ordinances actually mean exactly what it says. When we say no fill and build, no building in FEMA flood zone because it's zoned appropriately, we have to mean just that. When we start stepping back from ordinances and regulations that we put in place, we open the door for developers to just wreak havoc and take advantage of the citizens of Charleston. The bill is always what? Pinned to the taxpayers. That's why we're looking at about a $2 billion burden right now. We just allow them to do as they so choose. I've not accepted a dime from developers. Low rate campaign, because we want to represent you, the citizens of Charleston, first and foremost.
Thank you. Dive in. Who wants to comment?
So I will. So one of the things that we've been debating, you probably read about in the paper, is this whole idea that new build or rebuilds where you damage more than 50%, we need to go to what's FEMA plus 2 feet over baseline. And that ordinance has been brought before City Council, does not have tied to it a ban on fill and build to meet FEMA plus 2. And without that ban on fill and build, that bill just can't go anywhere. So we have to make sure that everything we do in zoning is looking towards the future. And that ordinance that is sitting right on our desk right now, I'm going to vote against it unless it is tied into a long-term plan to stop getting to elevation through just building up dirt. It does show you, I mean, there's a schematic right here, how to build things in areas that may in the future flood. First, don't do it. And secondly, build up so if the water comes and goes under you. And we have to just make sure we do that. We've got the opportunity to do it. The other thing that they talk about, and our planning department's ready to go on this, is transferable development rights. There are certain places, Johns Island's a perfect example, with incredibly valuable land that should not be developed. There's two ways the city can stop that. We can just go tell them no and go broke, or we can develop a scheme of transferable development rights. And those have worked all over the world. And we've got large swaths of land, particularly on the peninsula, that are zoned light and heavy industrial, and we can transfer development rights right to those. They're on high ground and on spines. So zoning and all that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kecklenburg.
So zoning is absolutely important. I'll be honest with you, council has been reluctant to downzone properties, which is what will be required to reduce density in flood-prone areas. And we respect property rights. So I've come to the conclusion, even though a full review of zoning is needed and will occur next year when we do our review of our city's long-range plan, that will happen next year. We'll review all zoning. But the real way to put a damper on development in flood-prone areas is through the stormwater manual and new regulations in place. And I'll give you an example because we had this model of Church Creek Basin and all the flooding that occurred out there. We put a new rule in place that if you removed if you brought in a cubic yard of fill, you had to remove 1.25 or 25% more fill than you brought in. That alone stopped a development in a flood-prone area, and now the developer is suing the city over the fact that we have tougher regulations that he must meet. So, and Councilmember White served on that committee. I appointed him to it. It's part of our strategies. Number 3, governance is an important part of our strategies to control flooding and reduce overdevelopment in flood-prone areas.
At the beginning of your rebuttal, you mentioned the city council blocking some things. Does someone want to respond? Mr. Seekings or Mr. White?
Yeah, that was exactly what I intended to respond about, so thank you. One of the things that I think is incredibly important about what Mr. Checkenberg just said is this. Downzoning will guarantee you a lawsuit, and you will be guaranteed to lose.
Can you explain what downzoning is?
Downzoning is effectively a taking a site that's entitled to a certain density and changing the zoning to something lower, ultimately lowering the value of that piece of property. And when you do that, you will be sued and you will lose. And we know that. And we've been warned against it time and time again by our legal counsel. So what I would contend is more important than trying to go through a process of getting sued by everybody who owns land in the city of Charleston. How about we start by just saying no? Because if somebody walks into my office as mayor and says, I want to build here, and I want to do this, and it's not the right thing to do, and it's going to put people in harm's way, the answer is going to be no, period. And if they know walking out of my office that they're not going to be supported by me, you can be assured I'm also going to work with everybody on my council and say, we're all going to say no. And that's how we're going to stop things. Create vision, but have the strength to say no when it's right.
Anyone else before we move on?
Just this whole idea that council isn't prepared to go and look at zoning and make some changes, I can give you a perfect example. Canterbury, Elliottboro, we rezoned the entire district not too long ago. We did it through a plan, and what we did is we zoned it back so there weren't late night establishments next door to people. We went from full commercial to lower commercial, and that worked. We, with a plan, and we can certainly do it when it comes to zoning and water, this council's ready to go to work with plans going forward. So this whole idea that council's been reluctant, council's ready to go, ready to work. I will tell you, I represent you in District 8. We've done a lot of work in District 8 because we've been focused on it. We need to bring that citywide. It all comes back to have a comprehensive plan and stick to it and move forward with it. Don't do it backwards, think forwards.
We have time for one more. Ms. Orr?
So Charleston is growing, as we all know. It's going to continue to grow. So I think it's wise that we not build in floodplains and low-lying areas, which means we are going to have to build where the land is high, which means that we are going to have to be a more densely populated city, which I know is a four-letter word for a lot of people. And I think it is incumbent upon leadership to explain why this is necessary, and also to make sure that when we do increase the density of the city, that we do it in a way that actually enhances the livability of our city rather than deteriorating it. And there are ways to do it. Other cities are doing it. It actually also makes for a more fiscally viable city as well, which is going to be all the more important as we take on the challenges of dealing with rising sea level. So I think it's important. I know some people up here are very much against changing the suburban nature of some parts of Charleston, and I do believe that that is going to be what's required if we're going to make sure that we have housing that's accessible for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. We have to move on for time now. So we're going to the next question. It's for Mr. Tecklenburg. The Army Corps of Engineers is currently doing a study on peninsula surface flooding. You've said this would be a major source of funding to build a protective infrastructure. But what if Congress decides not to fund the project? And that's for Mr. Tecklenburg.
Well, I must start by saying how proud I am to have brought the Corps to a partnership with the City of Charleston to vet and design a protection for the peninsula of Charleston. It's an amazing partnership. We're about a year into it. Come first of the year, there'll be a public presentation about their design that they've come up with. So, you know, what if, the great thing about it is it's kind of like Deeping in the Harbor, and y'all are familiar with that project. It's a very expensive, hundreds of $1 million project, and the reason why the federal government is helping pay for it is because the Corps of Engineers vetted, designed, and it passed a cost-benefit analysis. They are doing the same thing for this perimeter protection of the peninsula. They're designing it, but they're also doing a cost-benefit analysis to show the federal government that this protection, a penny of protection is worth a pound of fixing up afterwards.
Mr. Tecklenburg?
Am I bad?
No, but the question was, what if they don't approve the funding?
What if they don't approve the funding?
Yes.
Well, I mean, you don't get kissed unless you ask. We've got to ask for this money. It's not a matter of we can't do this. It's a matter we must protect the peninsula of Charleston. We must protect our citizens and property. So if they say no, we're going to keep on trying because it's the best avenue we have to get some serious funding to address flooding and sea level rise in the city of Charleston is with our good Uncle Sam and through this partnership with the Corps of Engineers. I'm very proud we're doing it. Yes, it's going to take some advocacy. We're going to need Groundswell, a great Groundswell to join us to ask our elected officials when this proposal goes to Congress, and it may take a little while to get it, but
So we're moving on to rebuttal. Who would like to comment and have rebuttal? Thank you.
So just, if you're not clear on exactly what we're talking about up here, the Army Corps 3x3x3 study is a study being done by the Army Corps of Engineers with a single purpose, and that's to build a perimeter defense system around the peninsula of Charleston to protect against tidal surge. It is a single-purpose project that once it's designed and then it's priced out, 65% will be paid if it's appropriated by Congress, by the federal government, 35% by us. It's a billions of dollar project and it is single purpose. If you go and look at the Dutch who were just here, that we paid, one of the recommendations for the peninsula right here, perimeter protection must be multifunctional and beautiful. That is completely at odds with what the Army Corps of Engineers is doing, and we're going to have to figure that out. A single-purpose, non-multifunctional wall around the perimeter of the peninsula for billions of dollars that we have to pay 35% of is not the end-all answer to all this. It is not how we're going to attack and address the problems that we've got today, and it's a minimum 15 to 20 years down the road. We've got to act today, and waiting on that study is not the answer that I think all of you sitting here are looking for.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Moving on then. The next question is for Ms. Orth. The majority of funding the current administration has identified to fight and prevent flooding comes from the public sector, and the estimates of those costs are more than $2 billion. Ms. Orth, what about the private sector? What about private sources? Is that something you would pursue?
If you could clarify which specific private sources you'd be referring to, I'm not sure they borrowing money?
Well, for instance, when you look at the Dutch dialogues and you look at the people, the businesses and the institutions that sponsor the Dutch dialogues, that's something kind of like a blueprint, for instance. Many large corporations here, could sign on to different projects.
So asking for kind of voluntary contributions to subsidize.
Yeah, what are your ideas around that?
I think if we could get them to, that would be great. I think in the U.S., we tend to be a little less reluctant to voluntarily contribute to government infrastructure programs. But on the subject specifically of the $2 billion price tag, we've been told that we need $2 billion, I've heard it said, to solve Charleston's flooding problems. And I think that statement in itself contains the hubris that has in many ways landed us here. That the idea that we're going to be able to construct with concrete enough seawalls and enough tunnels and enough drainage to save us from rising sea levels is, it would be wonderful if it were true. I don't think it is. I think a cautionary tale, New Orleans just teamed up with the Army Corps to build a project, their levies $14.5 billion on this project. They knew that they were going to sink over time and need to be reinforced. They're sinking at a much faster rate than they had predicted. So a cautionary tale in terms of thinking that the Army Corps is going to come and wave a magic wand and pour some concrete and save us. I do believe it's that kind of thinking, this idea that we can actually fight with Mother Nature and win, that is the source of a lot of the problems we're having now. And so I am a firm believer in accepting the Dutch's advice of waterproofing, rainproofing our city, working with nature. They suggested that rather than boxing with nature, we do judo, so it's the art of yielding, understanding that we are not going to fight the water and win, but we can work with it. We can improve our ability to absorb water and in that way come together as a community to ultimately be more resilient through this.
Who wants to weigh in? Mr. White.
The $2 billion number that was put out there, that was pre the Army Corps of Engineers additional $1 billion that they're now talking about. This number can continue on and on and on as we go. I've spent nearly 2 decades in banking myself. I've got a very long record and history and skill set within finance. And one of the ways that we're going to have to be able to address this problem as we move forward, it's not going to be by ourselves. It's going to be working with a lot of folks. And that's going to include the private sector. And the private sector is going to have to participate. And I agree with Ms. Orr, it's highly unlikely they're going to do it voluntarily. And not that I'm interested in force-feeding this on folks, but the reality is if we're going to fix our problems, we're all going to have to participate. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to bond that money over time so that we can pay for these projects because they have price tags that are astronomical. It took us 20 years to put together the funding source for Spring Fishburne. 20 years. Well, we don't have 20 years to wait before we just do one project, and now we got $3 billion worth. Everybody's going to have to participate, and it's going to include the private sector.
Thank you. Mr. Tecklenburg?
So yeah, the elephant in the room is how are you going to pay for all this? And I would tell you that it's one bite at a time. And it's done by project, because each project that we engineer and devise has different funding opportunities. And if, by the way, if you don't think down the road with sea level rise that we're not going to need a perimeter protection for the peninsula and other parts of our city, just think about that 2 to 3 feet of sea level rise that's predicted over the next 50 years. That's real, that's happening. Okay, but one project isn't the answer. It's this whole variety of projects, and it differs per drainage basin. In the Church Creek Basin, for example, we have room to do some natural storage, and we're applying to the National Wildlife and Fish Foundation for funding. The rebuilding of the low battery seawall, we're applying, already have, to the State Infrastructure Bank Board because it fits those requirements. When we get to do the perimeter wall, we're going to be applying to the federal government. For King and Hugie Street, we engineered that. We applied to the Rural Infrastructure Grant. Some folks laughed at me. How can you do that? Because the lady told me that Charleston was eligible. We got $500,000. Every project, one bite at a time, is how we're going to eat this elephant.
Thank you. Who else would like to weigh in here? Yeah.
The population of the city of Charleston is 135,000 people. We get 7.5 million visitors every year, and that is the segment of the private sector that we need to look at for infrastructure. We are building the low battery seawall right now. It is by and large funded. That money is coming from accommodations and hospitality taxes. We need to look around. Go look at those cruise ships that are parked at the end of your street. They take 3,500 people twice a week away from Charleston. They charge probably $1,000 a person, do it 104 times a year, and they pay zero directly to the city. Those are the sources that we need to look for.
Anyone else?
I'd like to also try to get money through, we're doing what's called a public-private partnership with a lot of the buildings that are being built here in Charleston, which is a clever way of saying your tax dollars are being used to build private sector buildings, and I don't think your tax dollars should be used for private sector buildings. I think we should take that money. I don't know what the actual amount is here in Charleston, but start using that money towards funding mitigating flooding. Thank you.
I think $2 billion is a lot of taxpayers' money. However, some projects require immediate fixes, right? So we bond to capacity. Some property worth protecting, all worth protecting, no doubt. But we can't take 15 to 20 years to fix this problem. If we bond to capacity, we fix it in 3 to 5 years. And then we move to the next project. We can do it. But some of this must be done through a fixed cost assessment program, where we pay as we go for the few things, the little things. We don't want to endebt the city on the small projects, but the major capital projects, we have to go to the bond market and we have to fix it over a shorter period of time, 3 to 5 years and not 15 to 20 years.
Thank you. Next question is for Mr. White. Did the Dutch Dialogues report exceed your expectations? That it would be just another study? And do you think it was worth the money spent?
You must have heard I voted against it. And that's true. I voted against funding the Dutch Dialogue. And the reason being is I've heard enough studies. And so I've read the report, and I've gone through the summaries and the executive summaries. And what I've identified in it is that it continued to define our problem, which is water. But yet it still continues to give us examples of things we can do that are still very forward-reaching and is going to take a significant amount of funding, of which we've all talked about. We have a master drainage plan that the city did in 1984 that still to this day, there are parts of that that have not been completed. We had Church Creek Drainage Basin, we had work done there, and we studied that. I am sick and tired of studying. I'm ready to start taking action. We need to begin to addressing the issues that we have in front of us. We can start by taking care of the maintenance and taking care of the infrastructure we have currently in place to help today, not 20 years from now, but today. We just had a group come back and share with us, AECOM did some work for us in the Doo-Wop area in West Ashley, and they said it would take $3.5 million to improve that area, 11 different sites. $3.5 million? We can do that. And we can do that in one budgeting cycle. $100 million, $400 million, $1 billion, that's going to require a lot of work and a lot of thoughtful introspection to figure out how we fund that. And I can assure you, in my personal opinion, I would suggest you want a banker at the helm to help you understand how you do that. And that's my suggestion as we move forward. And I will tell you that to this day, I continue to look at studies in the same way. If you're going to study something, don't put it on the shelf. Do something with it. I'm a business owner. I don't have the luxury of studying something and just saying I might do something with this at some point in the future. My business is going to be successful and thrive because if I look at the opportunity, I study it, I analyze it, and then I begin taking action and executing exactly what is recommended in those plans. That's what we have to do. We can't continue to study and study and study and study and ultimately have no results at the end.
Thank you. Who would like to comment?
So, first off, on the funding of it, 3/4 of the cost of the Dutch Dialogues are actually paid by someone other than your city. So we got a pretty good bargain from the world's experts that have been doing this for 800 years. And the question is, did it meet expectations or exceed expectations? For me, it met expectations right on. We've spent lots of time with the Dutch in advance of this, both here and in the Netherlands. Some spent longer time there than others, but we spent a big long time with them. We knew what we were getting when we brought them in. And what they've told us is we got a lot of work to do, and you've got to start now. I've got that report in front of me, and there are things we can implement tomorrow. The Johns Island plan, you could tear those pages right out of this book, and you can adopt it as a city council ordinance tomorrow. It has got things in here that we can do. So, met expectations, and it told us that we have to start working today. We can't wait 10 years, we can't wait 20 years. We have to get serious about it. Everything we do has to go back to something that they think about in every project they have, and that is the people who live here, y'all's quality of life. And that's what this is all about. So we got to go to work. This thing isn't going to get dust. It's not the end-all of end-alls either. We have to get collectively serious about addressing the one issue that everyone in this room knows is something that has to be taken care of, and we cannot wait 10 or 20 more years for another study and another whatever's out there. Got to start now.
Thank you. Who else? Mr. Secretary.
So we got a great bang for buck with Dutch Dialogues. It's brought really the world's best expertise here. And Mr. Seekings, you started off by saying what we needed to do was come up with a plan. Folks, we've already got a plan. We're engaged in a plan. It's a 5-part plan. It's outlined in my strategies for flooding and sea level rise that both of these gentlemen voted for and approved a year ago. It's 5 components. One is the infrastructure. Yes, we're building projects now. There's additional engineering that needs to be done for future projects, but that's ongoing. We've got so many engineering plans coming together for future projects. It's really incredible. Secondly is the resources to pay for it. I've been talking about that. We got to take a project at a time and get it funded in order to build the infrastructure that's needed. Bring the expertise here. We did that already with the Dutch and the Corps of Engineers. Thirdly, the governance. We've been working on this for a year. We'll have the task force report for approval by council within a month of the stormwater requirements we need. Land use. Don't build in places that have flooded before or that are 6 feet or less below sea level. We've learned that. Engagement. All our citizens need, I'm so glad you're here. All of us need to be a part of this effort. We are in this boat together. It's the existential issue facing the city of Charleston. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Who else would like to comment before we move on? Ms. Orr?
I will admit I haven't read all 250 pages, but I read the preliminary findings, and I will tell you why I am here and why I shouldn't say disappointed, it was beyond the scope, but we are talking about the symptoms of climate crisis. That's what flooding is, that's what rising sea level is, that's what these hurricanes coming fast and furious are. They are symptoms of an underlying problem, and we are not, as a city, doing anything to lead on the actual cause of this. And yes, we have to deal with the symptoms, but if we, as the city that's facing the biggest effects of climate crisis, are not willing to lead on this, to show the rest of our country what it looks like to be a city that says, yes, we're dealing with the symptoms, but we're dealing with the cause too, because if we don't reverse climate crisis, we, Charleston, will not exist except for as Atlantis. And we have so much that we could be doing in our city right now, and we are not. And I applaud Mayor Tecklenburg for signing on to the Paris Accord when Washington pulled out of it. But other than that, I don't think that we've actually made any progress in our city, and that is why I'm up here today. Thank you.
Ms. Irwin?
Well, if you want to get involved in some action, Harry Griffin trying to introduce next Tuesday on August 8th at 5 o'clock. He wanted to have an ordinance written for a first reading, and I don't think they're going to allow it, on banning fill and build. That is a concrete thing that we know causes flooding, and it needs to be voted on. It should be voted on before the election so you know where everybody stands. And I don't believe they're going to allow it, but everybody should show up at the city chambers on Tuesday at 5 p.m. on Broad Street and let it be known that you want this voted on Tuesday. Thank you.
Mr. Washington?
So it goes back to zoning. The Dutch came, they visited with us. We all know the role of overdevelopment and the hazards that it presents, correct? Drive down Meeting Street heading north. Drive down King Street from Calhoun to, say, Mount Pleasant Street. Drive over to West Edge, Hagan Avenue, Spring Street. Drive near Bayside Manor. Drive down Hugie Street. And what do you see? Overdevelopment. Overwhelming our existing drainage system. But yet, we say to you, it's going to cost you $2 billion to fix the problem. So, on the one hand, we're in your pocketbooks. On the other hand, we are doing and practicing the very things that create the hazards in the first place. Zoning is our best defense, ladies and gentlemen. Strong zoning regulations.
Thank you. We're moving on to the next question for Ms. Irwin. Regarding the expansion of 526, and its effects on flooding. Jason Crowley with the Coastal Conservation League says, he's quoted, "Johns Island, where 526 would run right through, is one of the most vulnerable sea islands. This whole road could exacerbate flooding. Where is this going?" What is your response? 526, and he's saying that it could make flooding worse.
I actually agree with him. I know a lot of people want the expansion, but that's just a big concern of mine. I'm just so afraid it's going to get to the point when people aren't even going to be able to live on Johns Island. I don't know if there could be some other solutions to help them get off the island. I'm not even sure when 526 would be able to be completed at this time anyway, but it is a big concern of mine of what it would do, because I know that it goes right through some marshland. So, yeah, at this time, I think I'd like to be able to use the money for mitigating flooding, because nothing else matters if you can't stay in your home. I met a woman recently whose home, every time it rains now, her house floods, and I just think if people can't live in their homes, you know, there's nothing else that matters first.
Thank you. Mr. Tecklenburg.
I'm always glad to talk about 526. It's not the enemy of flooding. It creates connectivity for vehicular traffic. It creates the connectivity we need for our future public transit, which will be a road-based system, y'all. It's not going to be a rail system. A lot of study went into that. Our public transit of the future is a road-based system. We need 526 to provide connectivity for future public transit. And most folks don't know this, but it will include a wonderful bike and pedestrian facility trail that will accompany the current Plan G of 526. What will reduce overdevelopment on Johns Island is the stormwater manual. And with all due respect, the no-fill provisions belongs in the stormwater manual, not as a separate ordinance. So it's included in that matter that will be taken up in the near future. So don't build in areas less than 6 feet above sea level. Put the new storm water requirements in place. That's what we've been working on now for a year. That's what's going to control and reduce overdevelopment in flood-prone areas. We still need 526, y'all, to provide connectivity and transportation in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on now. Oh, Mr. Washington, go ahead.
Yes. You know, when you extend roads, widen roads, what follows? More development. Extend and widen, more development. That's why we have to get the zoning right first. Now, we can deal with some of the traffic issues at choke points, Main Road and Highway 17, for example, with the flyover, Pitchfork at Maybank and River Road, would help quite a bit. But if we expand and extend without getting the zoning ordinances in place first, the planning piece first, 5 to 10 years from now, traffic congestion will be worse in the region.
Thank you. So moving on, this line of questioning has no rebuttals, and each question is a little different for each of you. We'll begin with Mr. Tecklenburg. Charleston faces an existential threat of being flooded out, with lives and livelihoods being ruined. Your office and the city council have been at loggerheads for quite some time. If you win the mayor's race, how will you work more effectively with the city council?
Well, thank you. And over the last 4 years, y'all, we have really accomplished a lot as a council and passed many things, including our sea level rise strategy.
I think we're asking a future question. How?
Right. I'm just setting it up that over the last 4 years, we've actually passed a lot of stuff. It's in this election year that there's been, with numerous city council members running, in competition
Yes.
with me. That
To
it's,
review.
I call it silly season, and there's a lot of issues that have risen up that have, they haven't really prevented. They've been a distraction.
Mr.
more so.
Mayor, if you win, are you going to do anything differently with the city council?
Well, I'm going to continue to work with city council. I've been said before that I don't communicate well. I intentionally had a one-to-one meeting with all of my city council members every month. Not all of them have agreed to take it up with me, so I'm going to continue to be willing and open and transparent, meet with my council members and work on those issues, get up every day and do what's right for the city, and we'll come along. It's going to be fine after the election.
Published reports have said that you have a liaison for all the city councilors. Is that true? You have a person designated?
So I set up these one-on-one meetings, and then just in case I needed to get a word out real quick on some subject, I had my senior staff, and we said, okay, well, you take 3 and you take 3, and we need to call city council real quick over some issue. Yeah, we divided up. It was just a communications tool.
Do you think that is working? Is that working well for you?
Is that working well for us?
Yes.
It didn't work out because city council complained about it, so I'm happy to, I still meet with them one-on-one. Sometimes they make the meeting, sometimes they cancel out on me. And as appropriate, when there's a city council meeting coming up, we communicate on issues that are coming forward city council.
Thank you for that. Our next question is for Ms. Irwin. Considering the immensity of the flooding crisis, do you think you have broad enough goals to lead us to solutions?
Well, I mean, the day after the election, if I had the honor of being elected your mayor, I would immediately meet with all the folks that are working on our flooding and take me around the city. And I would sit down and meet with the city council and work on, I want to make sure that our mitigating flooding is in place, because we cannot apply to FEMA for some of these grants unless we are up to date with our report that has to be done every 5 years. So I want to get that in place so on day 1 I could start applying for various grants to start mitigating the flooding issues.
Thank you. Mr. Seekings, you've been on the council for a number of years. Do you think the mayor has taken undue credit for flooding initiatives? Do you think the mayor has taken undue credit for flooding initiatives?
So I might turn the microphone over to the audience on this one. So I've been on the council for 10 years, and when I first was campaigning, Michelle and I were walking down Gadsden Street, we saw water coming up through the tarmac on a clear day. So that's been an issue for a long time. You know the water's been around. We have gone out in District 8, and I look around and I see my neighbors around here from Bulldown Street, Gadsden Street, Halsey, Rutledge, Ashley, Colonial. You see us out there at 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. We have really worked hard in District 8, not just me, but other people that are good servants of this city, to figure out on a micro basis what we can do to make your life and your quality of life better every single day while we think about the big picture and all these billions of dollars everybody talks about. So one of the things we discovered is there are some things we can do, and we went out and did them. And I will just tell you, in District 8, you go look at a map, you know where they are, you know what's happened, you know who's done it. I believe on the issue in particular on check valves and getting after local issues and local flooding, you all know who did that work. We did that work. Your city council member from District 8 did that work. It took cooperation. Let's just talk what it is. I mean, that's a fact. We now need to translate that into the bigger issues and work collectively to do it. But in terms of issues in District 8, District 8 has had some good things happen. And they've happened because your council member, me, has gone to work on them. I'm your neighbor. I want to be free from water and have dry feet just like all of you did. And the way to do that was to roll up sleeves, get our feet wet, and get after it. And we did it, and you know it.
Mr. Washington, you've served on the council before. How would you work with the city council if you become mayor to manage the flooding, the relationships with city council? You've been on the council, You've run for mayor in the past, you're running for mayor again. What would you change about those relationships?
Well, I made it a point, the 8 years I served on Charleston City Council, to build meaningful relationship with my fellow council members. I took a very proactive role and position on major issues in City Council District 5. I have with me, for example, a VHS tape. Now, I don't know if you guys have an instrument to play this on. But this goes back to 1997. 1997. And it's all about what? Flood. Stormwater runoff. 1996. 1993, 1994, I was talking about this issue, video recording this issue, taking the mayor and members of city council on tours. I just think you have to inspire, you have to present a real vision in order for people to want to follow. You have to keep your council members informed. A simple thing as presenting an agenda packet 7 days, 10 days before the council meeting goes a long way in bringing people together. No surprises, no last minute offers, but working intimately, intelligently with council members in their district, trying to really learn of real issues and concerns within the districts that they represent. We got along well. The mayor and I, we got along well. We did things. We built sidewalks. We got the ditches clean. We addressed stormwater runoffs. We budget correctly and on the front end, but we did it through partnership. It's not hard. It's not hard at all, ladies and gentlemen. It comes down to just respecting the position of your colleagues and working with them every step of the way.
Thank you. Our next question is for Ms. Orr. You've run a really great nonprofit. Do you think you have enough government experience to tackle the flooding problem, which is so threatening?
Hello? Oh, there we go. So in that respect, the answer is no. But what I do have is vision. So the nonprofit that I run is called the Stone Soup Collective. We make soup mostly from local produce that otherwise would have ended up in the compost heap. We turn it into healthy soup for our seniors in need. We work collaboratively with Charleston area senior citizens that runs our Meals on Wheels program, which has a waiting list right now of 80 seniors waiting to get Meals on Wheels, which I think is absolutely inexcusable. We use their kitchen, which they don't use after noon, and we're all volunteers, wonderful people from Charleston who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do what needs to be done. And this is the kind of cooperation and the vision to see that we have resources in our community that are going to waste, simply because nobody is saying, hey, we can take this food waste and feed, waste, I put that in quotes because it's not actually waste, to feed the food insecure people that we have in our community. I see this again and again. I've been actually working on food waste here in Charleston, trying to get our restaurants and grocery stores to donate more of the food that ends up in landfills to the people in need, because we have food insecurity, we have food waste. Food waste is actually number 3 on the list of causes of climate crisis. So this is actually a way that we can become more responsible and become a more just city. And so in that respect, I think my lack of government experience can actually be an asset, because I can see very clearly, I think in a way that people who are looking through the lens of government can't necessarily see that we have these resources that are being squandered. They say that when you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you're in government, everything looks like a big public works project. When you're a community organizer, you see possibility everywhere. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. Thank you.
Mr. White, you are running for the office because you want to govern differently. What will you do about flooding? Do you think that flooding is our most serious problem?
Flooding is a significant challenge across the entire city. It's a regional issue. It knows no boundaries, and it will continue to deteriorate our quality of life across our city. One of the things that I want to do as mayor is to ensure that we actually have an impact. We begin working on things that can start having a positive impact on flooding now, and that's maintenance. I would tell you that there's a significant amount of work that needs to be done within the existing infrastructure that we have in place. We have ditches that are clogged, we have outfalls that are clogged, they haven't been cleaned out in years, and we're finding out constantly. I chair the Ways and Means Committee, and just about every committee meeting, we have forward, our Public Services Department bring forward a request for funding for emergency repairs of collapsed tunnels. You know how they're finding out? It's not because they're inspecting. It's because somebody's developing a site next to it and says, oh, by the way, city, that pipe right there has been collapsed for years. We're finding that out constantly. We have to start maintaining the infrastructure we have. If we do, I guarantee you 60% of the problems that we have, rainy day flooding, when it goes high tide and it rains, that is not appropriate that we flood in situations. Now, when we have a storm, I get it. We have significant issues that we have to deal with. And some of these things that we're talking about with barriers and walls and all that, those are all things that are important. And in Calhoun West, and these are all things that we need to be focused on and building a plan on how we're going to fund them. But as mayor, there's only one thing that's guaranteed, and that's 4 years to get some work done. I'm not running for mayor because I want to be able to have the accolades of being mayor. I'm not running for mayor because I want a job. I'm not running for mayor because I want to have this as a political opportunity for something in the future. This is not a political career for me. I'm willing to give up my life, my family's life for 4 years to make a difference in our city. And while doing that, I want to see some things that change in our city and have a positive impact. And day one, I'm going to walk into City Hall and roll up my sleeves. I'm going to start doing things. I've got many council members who have not only endorsed and supporting me, they've asked me to run for mayor. When your peers ask you to run for mayor, that's an important opportunity to say that this is the guy that can get it done. This is what we want to get done for the future of our city. I want to see things starting to happen in our city.
Thank you, Mr. White. So moving on to our final question tonight, and this question is also for everyone. But what we're looking for is a yes or no answer. A yes or no answer only.
Well seated.
Well seated. Yes, well seated.
This is very difficult.
Okay. So I'll ask the question first, and then I'll call on each person individually. If you lose this race, considering the immensity of what Charleston is facing, can you work with whoever becomes mayor to fight what may be Charleston's largest issue in this century, flooding due to climate change? Yes or no answer. In other words, if you lose, can you work with the person that has won the office, Ms. Orton?
Nope. Here we go. Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes, of course.
Mr. Seekings?
Definitely.
Ms. Irwin?
Yes.
Mr.
A
Tecklenburg?
resounding yes.
Candidates, thank you for your time and participation. That's the conclusion. That's the conclusion of the mayoral debate about the flooding crisis in Charleston, sponsored by Groundswell and the Sierra Club. The candidates, of course, will be available for the audience follow-up questions. Thanks to all of you for coming. Be sure to vote on November 5th.
Thank you all for having me.